Good evening and welcome to East Bartlesville Christian Church's small groups. Tonight we will be discussing this morning's message, talking about loving like Jesus, but specifically looking at how Jesus loved doubters. Okay, so tonight's small group format is going to be just a little bit different than usual. Instead of watching the video whole and then discussing it, tonight I will ask you to pause at certain points along the way to discuss, and then when you're done with your discussion, just resume the video once you finish that discussion point. Okay? Love you guys. Hope you have a great and blessed discussion tonight. You know, some of the strongest believers in Jesus Christ were once struggling unbelievers. People like C.S. Lewis or Josh McDowell or Francis Collins of the Human Genome Project, Lee Strobel, just to name a few. Charles Spurgeon once said, "I suppose no man is a firm believer who has not once been a doubter." Even the apostles who were closest to Jesus, they doubted after the women reported the resurrection on Easter morning. Even those doubters, they eventually went throughout the world to preach the resurrection, and they died for their faith. And so this morning's message was kind of a tale of these two skeptics. You had John the Baptist, and then you had the apostle Thomas. And so tonight for our small groups, what I want us to do is I want to consider these doubters, I want to consider their doubts, and I want to consider how Jesus handled their doubts. First thing we want to do is we want to take a look at these two notable doubters. You have John the Baptist or John the Baptizer who doubted Jesus' identity, while Thomas over here, he doubted Jesus' activity. John initially made a strong confession of faith, yet in this passage that we just read, we find John in jail. And it was as a prisoner where John starts doubting. But Thomas, on the other hand, Thomas was predisposed to doubt. You see, Thomas was loyal and courageous, and he was so loyal and courageous at one point that he announced that he was willing to travel with Jesus and even die with Jesus in John chapter 11. And you see, these brave and committed words show that Thomas was willing to follow and to experience danger with Jesus. And you see, Thomas, he was also real and honest. When Jesus told the disciples, "Where I go, you know, and the way you know," Thomas is the one who replied, "Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way?" You see, Thomas was not the kind of person to just nod and pretend to understand. Next, let's examine two noteworthy doubts. You see, John's doubt was based on these unfulfilled expectations. Unfulfilled expectations. And then Thomas's doubt was based on a personal presupposition. You see, John held misconceptions about the Messiah, expecting that the Messiah, Jesus, would set up his earthly kingdom now. That he would overthrow these Roman oppressors now, and he would end the suffering now, and he would judge the unbelieving world right now. Yet John found himself suffering in prison. And these unfulfilled expectations, on top of all of the emotional and the physical strain, produced doubt in John towards Jesus. You see, Thomas's doubts, though, they were based upon his presupposition that dead people don't get up again. And you see, Thomas, he was crushed. He was heartbroken that Jesus has died. His whole world is flipped upside down, and he didn't expect Jesus to rise from the dead. He wasn't even open to the idea, which makes his doubt just a shade different. You see, Thomas's doubt was actually unbelief. Now, doubt is not the same as unbelief. Doubt looks for answers, but unbelief does not care about the answers. Doubt says, "I cannot believe," and unbelief says, "I will not believe." Doubt is honest, but unbelief is obstinate. John was going through personal suffering, whereas Thomas went through personal solitude. You see, doubt works through difficulties and finds faith that is reasonable and satisfying. Unbelief decides against faith, and it pushes it away at all cost. Matthew Henry once said that there are none so blind as those that will not see. Next, we examine two noticeable displays of Jesus' love. You see, first, Jesus appealed to fulfilled prophecy. Specifically, Isaiah 35, verse 5, and Isaiah 61, verse 1. Jesus appeals to fulfilled prophecy to affirm his identity to John and to show John why he should believe. But with Thomas, he appealed to personal discovery. See, if you notice, Jesus graciously humbles himself to Thomas's request, and Jesus gives him evidence. Listen, if you need evidence, the credentials of Jesus are many and they are undeniable. His impact on human history, his fulfillment of prophecy, his claims about himself, his resurrection in particular. Verse 27 could literally be read, "Stop becoming faithless and become a believer." And in response, Thomas rose from the lowest depths of unbelief to the highest of heights of faith. To close out or to finish up tonight's discussion, here are some tips for you on dealing with doubters. First of all, number one is this: be available. In both of these cases, Jesus responds to John and to Timothy, knowing that some people, they want a rational faith because their heart cannot delight in what the mind rejects as false. Second, or number two, is to be unshockingly patient. We as Christians do not have to operate from an offensive posture when people make outrageous challenges against Jesus. Case number two is to be unshockingly patient. Number three, be prepared. Read up on the evidences for faith and show others that God is not asking them to take this blind leap into the dark, but rather a balanced leap into His light. Lastly, number four is just be nice. As Benjamin Franklin said, a spoonful of honey will catch more flies than a gallon of vinegar. So be nice. If you notice, Jesus did not reprimand John and Thomas for their failure. Instead, Jesus compassionately offered proof for his identity and his activity. You can see, Jesus Christ loves people, even doubters.